What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All-NBA Show, part of the All-City Podcast Network. I'm your host, Adam Mares. I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Tim Legler. Game one is in the books, Legs, and it was a blowout. We said there'd be one or two blowouts. Well, we checked one off the list already.
Yeah, I hope that's all we get, just from an entertainment perspective. I'm sure Boston would disagree with that. Their fans probably would love to see that every night. Yeah, look, you never know when you're going to get one of these lopsided games. They typically happen every series for the most part.
Oh.
We got one right off the bat. I thought it was a combination of Boston hitting Dallas with, and I described it to you last night in a text message, as a nuclear level of energy. That's what it felt like watching the game. I'm sure that's what it felt like to the Dallas Mavericks. And it wasn't necessarily right out of the gate. You know, they for the most part, the first 6-7 minutes were pretty innocuous, back and forth, you know, within a point of each other. And then the Kristaps Porzingis effect is really what turned this game. The way that he played as a shot maker, as a rim protector, and Boston played very well. I thought overall Dallas played far below their best. And when you get that combination, this is what you get. A game that was almost a 30-point deficit. Got interesting there for a quick second. Boston takes a timeout when Dallas cut it to 8, and then they quickly got that thing back up to 20. So there are definitely some things to take from this game, but there are also some things that I think if you're Dallas, you flush, because you just assume certain players are going to play better and you're going to handle certain things better. But some of the issues that they had on both ends of the floor are real, and that's going to require some changes on their part schematically.
Adam, you're muted. You muted yourself.
How did I get muted there? I have no idea. I'm very excited for the show because the Celtics were unbelievable in this one. And so there's a lot to break down. We're going to do some top level stuff, what went wrong, but we're also going to get into the details because there's some detailed notes I know we want to go over that lead into game two. But first, we are presented as always by DraftKings Sportsbook. Stay tuned because you'll hear more about DraftKings and all it has to offer throughout the show. DraftKings, the crown is yours. So diving into this, the score was 107-89. But the real story is the score was 37-20 after one. It was a dominant first quarter performance. And as you mentioned, Kristaps Porzingis goes for 11 points, 3 rebounds, 3 blocks in the first quarter alone. He was everywhere making an impact. And while the Celtics made shots early before he even came into the game, when he came in, it was an avalanche, a knockout punch really in that first quarter. To me, he's probably line item number one, the impact that he had. We wondered what kind of impact he would have. How healthy does he look? The impact was unbelievable. Protecting the rim, really challenging, making things hard for the scheme that Boston played. We'll talk about it in a second. But you need somebody to protect the rim. You need somebody to be there to allow everyone to kind of stay home. He did that, and then he punished the switching defense of Dallas. Those are the things that stood out to me. But about Porzingis in particular, how did he make such an impact?
Yeah, look, you knew one thing for sure was going to be the case with Kristaps Porzingis. He was going to have fresh legs. And so, when everybody else is, they did have a week off. So most of these guys actually probably felt very, very fresh. But he's had 38 days, I think, since he last played. And so, the adrenaline he was going to have was just going to be a little bit extra over what any normal night would feel like for Kristaps Porzingis, playing in the finals for the first time, all of those things. So, you get this, he checks into the game, and it was like a 1-point game when he checked into the game. And I'm looking at this now. It was 15-14 Dallas with 6:38 left in the quarter. From that point on, there was outscored 23-5 the rest of the way. Porzingis had a big part in that with his shot making. Definitely was a presence defensively. Even had a couple plays where he blocked shots out on the perimeter on guards, on pull-ups that just affected, I think, guys' confidence a little bit early in the game. Dallas got a little bit rattled with that surge. I just thought the shot making was what I didn't expect to happen that fast. And I don't think Jason Kidd and his staff, in talking about this game, knowing he was coming back, what Kristaps Porzingis represents when he's fully healthy. They certainly have seen him long enough in this league. They have enough film on him and the Celtics this year to know what that looks like when he plays. But I don't think there's anybody sitting on that Dallas bench and from the coaching staff perspective or their players that thought Kristaps Porzingis is going to come out and make shots like that. That's I don't care what you're doing in replication in the gym by yourself or in whatever, semi-live contact drills he's been doing, shooting over guys. Nothing is going to compare to the speed of an actual game, and particularly a stage like that. When he's going to be amped up, he's probably got some butterflies. Come out and shoot the ball the way he did on those switches, where he basically was just jab, 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 and then shooting over guys like Jaden Hardy and Josh Green and Luka Doncic, doing that. And then one time, he gets a dunk where I thought Lively was just absurdly overly aggressive last night, the entire game out on the perimeter, just like guarding him chest to chest, 28 feet and flailing at the ball and all off balance. And then Porzingis just puts his head down and spins around him. He goes into the lane and dunks it with no backline protection. So I think Dallas contributed to it a little bit. But I think, the bigger point is this. This was a part of the opponent that it didn't look like Dallas was quite ready for that impact. And I don't think anybody in that building expected it to look like that. And Kristaps Porzingis really, in large part, more than any other player, turned that entire tide, set the tone for the rest of the game. Dallas made their one run, but it was never really where Boston was really legitimately threatened. And that to me is the result of the last 6 minutes of the first quarter. And Porzingis had his hands all over that part of the game. That's when it got away from Dallas. They never really recovered from that. And now we see, how do you adjust to him going forward if you're Dallas? You're not going to just live with him shooting over 6'4" and 6'5" guys. You're going to have to figure out now, what are you going to do differently with Porzingis? How can you be better defensively? Because I watched the entire first half again this morning. And for last night, I thought that was mostly all Boston. It was just like Boston played great. When I watched it back this morning, man, Dallas was really, that is not finals caliber readiness defensively. And in a lot of areas. I just did not think that was close to good enough for them when this defense has been praised as much as it has, Adam. So now the chess match begins, the adjustments begin, and there's only so much that you can adjust if you're Dallas from a personnel perspective. That's what I think a lot of people are looking at right now today, saying, well, it doesn't matter what they adjust. Boston's just significantly better, and this is how it's going to go the rest of the way. I'm not quite there yet after one game.
Well, it's every game one, especially in today's NBA where the three-point shot is such a big deal, and a team that gets hot and gets rolling early, it's like, this team will never miss again. They'll never lose. I kind of had the same feeling as you did that, you got to get a couple games into it to see what kind of adjustments there are and what kind of shooting regressions there are. But to stick on Porzingis, I talked about this earlier in the year as a thing that stood out to me that he had showed huge improvements from previous iterations of himself. And that is the ability to shoot over the Greens and the Hardys. I know it sounds silly, but Porzingis is a guy that can be disrupted by physicality from small guys. And as a big guy, and you probably know this too, maybe not so much at the NBA level, but when you're a taller guy and they put a littler guy on you, sometimes it can be hard when the guy gets to be in your space and he's got a low leverage. And Porzingis has struggled with this traditionally. I think one of the things that's different about this year, and I credit Joe Mazzulla a lot for this, they love getting the switch, putting him on the nail, and giving him the comfortable position of, okay, now that you're here, you're going to know how this feels. You know where the help comes from. You know what your moves are. And he's been very effective at it. Last night, though, he didn't miss. I think he was like 7 of 8 or something to start the game. So that's my question. You said that Dallas is going to have to switch up their defensive coverage. And this is my first question. How confident are you that Porzingis can replicate that if the defensive game plan was the same? Him specifically, forget every other aspect of this. He specifically would shoot that well over those switches.
I don't think that I'm not. I don't think that what you saw last night is like that's going to be par for the course in this series. I mean, because you go back and look at it. I mean, he had. So just look at his field goals made during that stretch. He had 2 of them where he got to the spot you're talking about, rose up. Both of those cases, there was contact with the defender. One was like an elbow that he caught Jaden Hardy with, and he fell backwards. He just went up and shot through that. Another one, he turned and got squared up. I think it was on Green, and his knee kind of hit him in the groin a little bit, and he bent over before he shot the ball. But they were definitely up in his space. But what I've noticed about Porzingis, when he catches the ball and those spots and he can kind of turn and square, and now he can play out of the jab step position, he's much better than when I've seen him struggle in his career where he would be sort of backed halfway into the post, catch it, start to back down, and then shoot a turnaround fadeaway jump shot where all that space was taken away from him, and he'd lean back and he'd land funny and those guys would be under him. I feel like he can almost use his elbows to an advantage in those situations because of the height of these players. Those elbows are up in this area, and no player is comfortable like sticking their face in there on that. I thought he did a nice job of keeping his elbows wide when he swung around and got enough space to go up and shoot through those. But he also hit like a trail 28, 29 footer, obviously a makeable shot for him. You're going to expect him to do that. I mentioned the play with Lively. That was 100% on Derrick Lively. Kristaps Porzingis wasn't even looking to score on that play. He caught the ball. He was looking to run a dribble handoff, and Lively was so overextended up in his space, like I said, just wildly swinging his arms at him, trying to bother him, that Kristaps Porzingis just realized this guy's got no leverage, and he just went by him with one step. And now, did he expect to go all the way to the rim and dunk it? Probably not, because you think somebody's going to come. Nobody came. So that's on Dallas. But, you know, that's got to be Derrick Lively looking at the film and Jason Kidd saying, what are you doing? Like, why are you harassing this guy that far out from the basket? You don't need to do it. You're 7 foot yourself. He's not going to shoot that jumper over you if you give him 2 or 3 feet. When you crowd him like that, he can go by you. So I thought Dallas kind of played into it. He was sensational. So your question sounds like, do I expect him to be sensational every night? No, he's going to make shots. But last night was kind of absurd. Like, he won every single matchup situation he had to. So do I expect that again? I don't think so, because I think Dallas now defensively is going to be a little bit more aggressive, physical with him, pushing him off his spot than they were last night.
Yeah. The other thing you just mentioned with Lively pressuring him out on the perimeter, one thing that I thought Boston did a great job of in this game was putting Jrue Holiday in the dunker. And oftentimes you have Kyrie on him. Sometimes it was Derrick Jones Jr., but it was a collection of guys who are not the primary low man on help. And I think when you say, as he drove and there was nobody there to meet him, well, if Lively's out on the perimeter and you have Kyrie Irving in the dunker spot, that's inverted, right? That's not the way you traditionally want. And I just thought that Mazzulla and the Celtics had a great game plan of, okay, they're going to switch everything. So we're going to get this opportunity to get our guys in their favorite spots. And we're going to force them to use the Kyrie as the rim protector or Derrick Jones as the rim protector. And obviously it worked really well. So that was another piece of this equation that I thought, it wasn't just shot making. It was also, I thought, a very smart sense of how Dallas plays defense and where they're vulnerable, and perfectly taking advantage of it with that key piece.
Totally agree. They did. They worked in that first half, particularly. They worked every single matchup that they had to have. And I did 3 different breakdown tapes last night on SVP. One was on the early rim attacks by Boston. I think they had 4 dribble drive straight line dunks. 4 in the first half of the game. That just can't happen when guys are literally just taking you off the dribble from 26 feet, getting all the way to the lane and dunking the ball. And now one of them was a spectacular finish by Jaylen Brown. I mean, that was defended pretty well. He just went over the top of those guys and got above Gafford and got that dunk to go. But the other 3, including the first basket of the game, was Al Horford driving from the right side corner off a catch because the closeout was so hard and that wasn't squared up to him. The closeout was literally the back. I remember who it was. It might have been Derrick Jones. His back was facing half court. So he basically completely just gave Al Horford the baseline on the closeout, and Al Horford caught it, looked, it was like, there's nobody under there. So that's your first basket you give up at the game, is an uncontested dribble drive straight line dunk. That was a bad sign for Dallas. They had 3 more of those in the first half. Tatum had one, Porzingis had one, and Jaylen Brown had one. So I did one breakdown on that. I thought that was setting the tone that we're going to play this way tonight. 3-point shooting kind of came off of that later, most of it. I thought the important ones. The other breakdown that I talked about with Boston was also they're frenzied rim protection. Like, they were flying to the basketball, jumping in the air, contesting everything. And I think a lot of that was because I didn't think Dallas did a very good job of being more decisive with the basketball. I don't think they moved it quick enough. There was too much dribbling going on in the perimeter. They were getting deeper into the clock, and now you got guys trying to go make great plays where Boston could hone in on what that was going to look like. They were very determined not to come off of those corner threes. 27 three-point attempts is an anemic number for the Dallas Mavericks. 7 makes. A couple of those were late. They really had 5 makes that even remotely mattered. You can't be minus 27 from the three-point line. So Boston defensively, it shouldn't happen both ways, where you're protecting everything in the paint to that extent and you're not giving up three-point shots at a high volume. So that's something that Dallas is going to look at on the film as well. So look, it might be at the end of the day, if Boston plays this smart and they shoot the ball this well and they get every matchup they want and they're picking on guys and trying to get what they want, and Dallas just can't guard these guys one-on-one. If that's what's going to happen in this series, and Boston will make quick work of these guys. It'll be a 5-game series probably. That's what we have to see. Here's the thing, Adam. Part of, I think, Dallas's struggles defensively too was how bad they were offensively in the first half. And Kyrie Irving didn't have any imprint on this game whatsoever. Dallas has to be better on that end to help their defense, because I think that's where you're looking really. Dallas's inability to guard them last night in the first half of this game, particularly in the first quarter when it got away from them, that is what we're looking at. And that's what they're going to be looking at first. And then they're going to talk about some of their stagnancy offensively and ways that they can attack Boston smarter.
So it was incredible that they allowed just 3 corner three-point attempts in the game. Just 3 for Dallas. Because when you talk about the lopsided three-point, they didn't get a lot up. Well, the corners make up the most valuable threes you can get, those kickouts to the corner, completely eliminating those. I mean, they get 1 to go down. They miss 2 others. That's an insane number. And the thing about it to me is, you were talking about the scrambling of the Boston Celtics. That was what stood out to me. These are 2 very good defenses. You know, Dallas since the trade, Boston all year. But what stood out to me was that Boston in this game looked like a phenomenal defense that could execute complex rotations perfectly time after time after time and do it with intensity. Dallas, on the other hand, I thought was actually very slow and late in their rotations and lazy even in their rotations. And I thought Luka in particular in this game was a very bad team defender. He's a bad on-ball defender for certain portions as well. I think he wore down as the game went on. But he was bad making the rotations, and the gap between those rotations was the difference. Boston was able to stay home on the corners, but rotate with everybody else so hard to take things away, and Dallas just wasn't able to rotate without that same pressure.
Yeah, very, very true and very fair. You saw the same thing I saw. I saw very little opportunities for Dallas to really get into the lane off penetration and then have an obvious available kick-out pass that would set this chain of events in motion. That's how offenses work. Boston did it a bunch last night, but it starts with the penetration. And then what's the reaction by the defense? And now there's usually an obvious kick out pass. And then it's either that guy shoots it, or now it's a chain reaction defensively where there's a rotation and then there's another pass. And hopefully at some point they can't catch up to the ball and somebody gets a clean look. That's the way Dallas likes to play. But sometimes with Luka, he's given the ball up. And most of the time we watch Luka, and certainly in this year in the postseason, when he throws it to you, he's expecting that to be a shot. That's when you're getting the ball. And there just weren't opportunities for that to happen, including not just the three-point line, Adam, the lobs. I mean, Gafford and Lively, they were 4 for 4 in the game. 4 for 4, but they're taking over, I think, like 11 shots combined a game.
Lively
so
just
they only got 4 field goal attempts. And I'm trying to remember, were any of those even like lobs? I think he threw one, if I remember. Lively mishandled it, but got it back like off the ground or off the glass,
off the ground, and goes up
and scored on it. But that's a huge part of what they've been doing to teams, and it's why, I expected Luka to be able to control the action again, to where he comes off, gets that guy on his back or hip. He's just coming down the lane at his pace. He's waiting for that back line commit, and he just times it perfectly. Here goes the lob, or here goes the kick out pass. If the corner guy comes in to pinch on the lob guy because Porzingis went to help, and now here comes Jaylen Brown off the corner to chip on Lively or Gafford, well, that means that corner pass is open where Jaylen Brown just left. None of that stuff was available. So this is what Dallas, in looking at it, is going to look at this, and they're going to try to figure out, well, how are all of these things we've been doing so well so far in the playoffs taken away at the same time? They shouldn't be able to take away.
That's the thing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. They should be able to take away like dribble drive penetration to the rim by Kyrie and Luka, which they
Right.
did a pretty good job of that, and the lobs and
In the corner.
threes. Like
Yeah.
you can't do it all, and yet somehow Boston was able to. So it's a combination of give Boston a pat on the back. That was absolutely phenomenal team defense. And look, there were times in the regular season they didn't have to play it at that level because our offense was so good that I don't think we put them in the same class as like Minnesota at their peak or even Dallas
Right.
over the last few months. We didn't put Boston in that class, even though when they added Holiday and Porzingis to go with the other guys, you thought, wow, this team defensively. But we talked so much about their offense. I think maybe we didn't give this defense enough credit based on what you saw last night. And now it's going to be, does Dallas have enough to match it or to be able to run their offense effectively against this defense? I mean, that's a big question mark, I'm sure, as they're sitting here today.
And there are some things we'll talk about them here in a second, but I want to finish up with some stuff with Boston. We made it 20 minutes into the show and haven't mentioned Jaylen Brown yet. I actually thought he was the best player of the game. I mean, Porzingis came in and was unbelievable for about a 7-minute stretch, just a tour de force in that beginning part. But Jaylen Brown was great all game. And in that third quarter, when they needed, when things got a little bit tight, he had several huge plays. And when you're talking about the effort it takes defensively to be the low man and rotate and do this or that, he had several of the plays where his athleticism and determination closed the gap and made plays that should have been like 70-30. Dallas is going to score here. He made plays that took those points off the board. So to me, this has been an incredible year for him, an incredible playoff run. And this game is a perfect continuation of what we just finished with in the last series, where he was making all of the spectacular plays and also making the dirty work look spectacular, which is impressive to do.
Totally agree. I mean, and I've been saying this, it's a good thing for Boston if Jason Tatum is not the guy we're talking about every night as their best player, honestly, because Jaylen Brown can do this. I thought Porzingis, obviously we talked about it, was great last night. Tatum had a solid game. He didn't shoot particularly well, but he had 11 rebounds. He had 16 points. It wasn't like a big night for any of these guys offensively. I agree with you. Jaylen Brown was the best player on the floor. I thought his defensive pressure that he could put on the ball handlers was important. His offense aggressiveness and just like physically going at people. And then he made a play last night that if you want to submit ever, if you're Jaylen Brown, for defensive player of the year, like a one trip, the play where he breaks up the lob first, goes up, battles the lob, makes Derrick Jones come down with the basketball and lands. And then they kick it out. And then there's a I can't remember who it was. Was it Exum? Somebody goes up in the air and then they pass it back to Jones on the baseline to go up to dunk it, and Jaylen Brown goes up a second time with an absolutely beautiful block. So his presence was all over as an athlete and just like this physical specimen that Dallas didn't really have anything to match last night. And give him credit, man. He was great.
Yeah, he was phenomenal. He really impressed me in this one. Is there anybody else for Boston that you think deserves a special shout out? I mean, I'm with you. Tatum didn't shoot the ball well. He did do some things well. I don't think it was a good game from him, but I just saw on the timeline last night a lot of people clowning him. They won by 20 points. Nobody on Boston played poorly. Everybody on Boston was good. So is there anybody else that you think deserves a shout out?
All of those guys were solid. Horford, Holiday, and Hauser, like the other three guys. Hauser's defense was really good in this game.
Yeah.
He was 3 for 4 from the field, 16 minutes. He hasn't been shooting particularly well. He got his first one to go. And he made that one that even live, I watched it in the replay, was even more amazing on the kick out to the left corner where the ball literally, he caught it. The ball was already above his eyebrow when he caught it, and the ball never dropped at all. He caught it. It was a very Klay Thompson sort of catch and release without
he didn't even really catch it. Yeah, just kind of quick into it.
Very, very bizarre, but he knocked it. I thought he was very solid. Holiday was solid. Their bench was something that we were saying, man, they're only playing 7 guys, going into this, and then to get Porzingis back, now you got 8, that was a big one, obviously, because Peyton Pritchard had a rough night, 0 for 7, 0 for 5 from the 3. He didn't really contribute the way he normally does. I think this could be a tough series for Peyton Pritchard, regardless. Because of the matchups he's going to end up in with Luka and Kyrie. I think it's going to be harder for him to play significant minutes. But to your point, nobody played poorly except Peyton Pritchard shooting, be the one thing you point to. And if you look at Dallas, which we're going to in a second, there's a number of guys that I had some concerns about the way they played last night. And right now we're sitting here after game 1, Adam. We don't know. It's too early to know this is it. This is how it's going to look. This is how it's going to be. We don't know that yet. Let's see what Dallas's response is going to be in game 2. That's I'll know a lot more by halftime of game 2 than I do right now, I think, in terms of the rest of this series and how that's going to look.
I agree. And Boston, you give them a lot of credit. They're really good when they get rolling, and they got rolling in that first quarter, and it just felt like you needed 5 timeouts to sort of slow down what was going on. But I think Dallas will come up with some things to slow them. Last thing I'm going to say on Boston here, just because I think it's important. It's something watching Denver this year. It's something that Boston does well that really stands out to me watching a team that doesn't do well, which is everybody on that team has a green light and has confidence from that green light. I think Joe Mazzulla has done a great job of giving the players, and they're mature players, but everybody on that roster will take quick shots. Doesn't matter if it's early in the shot clock. Doesn't matter if there's no rebounders. There's a green light to their process. If you get a shot in this circumstance, it doesn't matter what's going on. Just take it. And I think there's something very freeing about that from those guys. You saw quick shots early in this game that if they miss, maybe you get tight, but they were making them in large part because I think they were just so confident to take them. And it's a trait that they've had all year, and I think it's an important trait.
I agree. And I think part of that also is because when you have that kind of balance in shot making, particularly threes, you don't feel the pressure individually. You have to, shoot great. Like I played on teams in the NBA where there was only 2 or 3 guys that really had the green light. And so you felt like you were carrying the whole weight from the 3-point line for everybody. And so you put more pressure on yourself. In this situation, any of these guys, you can miss a couple in a row. It's no big deal because you know it's coming from all over the place. The balance is there. Again, I did the pregame radio show 2 hours before the game. And the very last question was, if you're looking at one thing tonight that is going to be a huge difference in the game either way, I said, Dallas cannot get like this kind of separation from the 3-point line. They can't. You can't be minus 27. They might not make as many threes as Boston in any individual game in this series, but you've got to be within 2 makes, 3 makes, 4 makes. You can't be down 9 makes to the Celtics. It's just not sustainable. So you've got to do a better job containing the ball so you defend the 3 better against them. And then obviously with their ball movement and what they're trying to get and what they're gonna do differently with regard to who they involve in pick and roll, what areas of the floor they do it, where their spacing is, they've got to do a better job of creating 3-point shots because 27 in this league now, that's just not going to get it done. You're going to have to be up in the mid-30s at least in attempts.
Well, the shots they're going to generate might not be the ones they get to all the time, and we're going to talk about that on the other side. In particular, Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, those guys have to be great for the Dallas Mavericks to win. They weren't in this one. So we'll take a break, and on the other side, we'll talk about why and also how they can adjust in Game 2 coming up over the weekend. They should get plenty of rest, lots of film study, and be back. First, let me tell you guys about our presenting sponsor. We're this close to crowning the NBA champ with the action heating up on the court. It's even hotter on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. They've got same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more. Don't miss out on the NBA as the NBA postseason winds down. Right now, you can get the Boston Celtics are favored by 7 points in Game 2. So Vegas actually looked at Game 1 and said Game 2 is going to be even bigger. I think they were minus 4.5 or 5 going into this last one. So minus 7 is an increase. They're feeling it. And if you're new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. They've got a new deal, brand new one. New customers bet $5 and you get $150 in bonus bets instantly. No matter what, download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code ALLNBA. That's ALLNBA. And new customers, you get $150 in bonus bets when you place your first bet of just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit 1-800-GAMBLER.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. 21 and over. Age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/bball for eligibility and deposit restrictions, terms, and responsible gaming resources.
Back here on the All-NBA show with Tim Legler. I see actually Armando's right. I think it was minus 6.5. So minus 7, only a slight increase from what they expected in Game 1. So nobody believes that this was, or Vegas doesn't believe that this was an abnormal performance. Let's get into Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. We talked a little bit about Luka, but I want to start with him because I actually think 30 points, if you just look at it, 30 points, 10 rebounds, the 1 assist is wild, but this is indicative. I asked you on Wednesday, what would you think if Luka had 45 points, but only 4 or 5 assists? Meaning I thought Boston's game plan coming into the series was we're going to take away the corners. We're going to take away his passing and force him to be a scorer. And I actually think that's what they did. The difference is they actually did a good job of not letting him be a scorer either. 30 points is good, but he was inefficient. I think, and I'm curious if you agree, that in game 2, he's got to have one of those 20-point first quarters. I know that's a lot to ask, but the way they're guarding him, he should be able to get to his spots and put pressure and doubt that that's the right strategy.
Well, a couple things. First of all, I think I have a little bit of a different view overall of how Luka played last night. It doesn't sound like you think he played very well. I'm looking at it saying he certainly wasn't great. He wasn't, Luka at his best. He definitely had a couple of turnovers where he, had his pocket picked and he wasn't very protective of the ball. A couple bad turnovers. He's one shot under 50%. I don't think that's a terrible shooting night for a star player in a finals game. With as much as everybody else was struggling, as much attention was on him. If you basically stealing the words out of my mouth that I said last night after the game, which was, if this is how they're going to play Luka in terms of trying to take away the way he makes the game easier for his centers and his corner shooters, you might see Luka Doncic have a completely different mentality now in the beginning of the game, because I always say I admire him because he comes out every night and he definitely dips his toe in the water first and sees how he feels as a scorer. But I thought there were several plays last night early in the game, first quarter, where he got in the paint and it was obvious he wasn't thinking score first. And he's going to process that differently in game 2, because now if you're thinking that way, it's just different in terms of your aggressiveness. Your rhythm is different when you're going in there knowing there's going to be an opportunity here for me, because he's going to score on all of these guys. None of Boston's individual defenders are a legitimate stopper for Luka Doncic. He's going to score on all of them. He just has to now look at it and say, you know what? It might take 40 out of me to loosen them up a little bit in terms of how they're playing me. And I don't think he had a 40-point sort of vibe and mentality about him last night. I thought he was headed there when they cut it to 8. And he had 15 points in the third quarter. And it was like, okay. And he had that little nod to the crowd. He went to timeout. I'm thinking like, wow, they cut it to 8. This is going to be interesting here. Let's see what happens. And then Boston immediately blitzed them out of that, and they got it back to 20. I think Luka's going to have a different approach at the start of this game if this is how Boston's going to play him, and they're going to try to take away some of his favorite passes. Well, then those are going to turn into shots for him. And let's see. And free throw attempts. So I'm very curious to see what his approach is offensively at the beginning of the game. I didn't think Luka was terrible last night. I thought almost everybody else on their team was. But I did not think Luka was terrible last night. I thought that he was below average slightly. But if he plays great, then, that's a totally different level. He definitely didn't do that last night. He just had nobody come along with him. There were guys last night that looked very uncomfortable. And that's the biggest concern, I think, if I'm Jason Kidd. Several of those guys did not look comfortable at all. I'm not worried about Kyrie. It's the rest of those guys.
I don't know if I'm convinced here. And part of this is, you mentioned the free throws, just 5 free throws for Luka. He actually goes 2 of 5, 26 shots and 30 points for the guy, especially in a team is going to say, hey, we're going to dare you to beat us. But I do agree with your larger point. That is, I think he comes out in game 2 and says, it reads the game, but says, if they're guarding me that way, I'm looking at the basket. I'm thinking shoot, and collapse them. And honestly, I think he'll have I think he is primed for one of those 15, 20-point first quarters in game 2. And if he can pull it off, I do think that it'll force some adjustments, or at least create the idea of, do we need to start adjusting if you're Boston? But Kyrie Irving's the other piece of this. And both of those guys kind of defended similarly in that they're not going to let you get off with the passing and get the ball popping. But he last night was especially terrible. 12 points on 19 shots, made some weird reads, dribbled off his shoe, dribbled sometimes we were wondering, like, usually he's a wizard. He's going to get
the ball wild. Remember the backcourt violation he had where he just threw the ball 10 feet behind the trail center and he just went out of bat. Like, he was awful. I've rarely seen Kyrie Irving play worse offensively than he did last night.
Yeah. And why? What do you think it was about? Because he did look shook. I'm not going to lie. It looked, I hate saying this because you want to talk about what teams are doing and how it got there, but there was a level of, he just looked a little out of rhythm personally in the game.
Yeah, he did. And it's like, I know that people are going to try to act like this Boston thing affected him. I would be shocked.
He's been
With
there
what
so many times.
with what Kyrie Irving's been
Yeah.
through in his career, the number of finals games that he has played in, the number of environments he's gone into that were hostile toward him and the team that he was on. I don't believe that was it. I just think Kyrie Irving, he just needed to get in rhythm earlier in the game. He didn't really even have his first half decent possession where it was like an opportunity for him to like 4 or 5 minutes into the game. That's not acceptable, man. Kyrie Irving's got to get something going faster. Remember game 1 of the Minnesota series? How aggressive he was against Anthony Edwards in the beginning of that game, how fast he was running off screens, catching the ball and going. He had one thing on his mind. I thought he was playing last night early the way he was playing in like the previous round against Oklahoma City when it was like, man, where's Kyrie? And then he turned it on in the second half. And it seemed like be this thing now. That's how he's going to play. And then Anthony Edwards challenged him, and he came out in that first game and was like totally different player. He needs to think that way in game 2.
Right.
I just thought he was super passive early. And then when he did finally try to get some space, he got 2 jump shots blocked by Porzingis, 2 of them. And next thing you know, by the time Kyrie kind of thought about, okay, let me get going, they're down 15 points. So, and then it just was a really rough night for him. I do not think it was the environment. I don't think it was the Boston crowd. The length of their defenders may have had something to do with it, but Kyrie Irving has scored over guys like that his whole life, and he's done it on big stages. So I am certainly not going to act like this is how this is going to go for Kyrie Irving. He's too good. His responses typically have been sensational throughout his career. Like thinking of Kyrie Irving having 2 really bad games in a row in the NBA Finals, that would be surprising to me. So let's see. But you're right. There's no other way around it. He was awful last night. Awful. He did not lend any support to Luka or that team, and they fell behind, and it was lights out for those guys offensively to keep them in it. What you're trying to do, Adam, right, is make this a 1-possession game with 5 minutes to go.
Right.
And they think they've got the answers then. They've got the 2 guys that most people trust the most in those situations to make big shots, even against great defense. Luka and Kyrie are probably 1-2 in this series. If you start listing, who do you expect to make a pressure shot when you have to? Well, obviously that was taken off the table when you're not in the game to make Boston feel that pressure. That's going to be Dallas's goal next game.
Do you think that Dallas has, so one of the questions I have is they're going to take away the corners. All right. And the passes that were open for 3 in this last game were 1 pass away. You dribble, either you back down. If you're Luka or Kyrie, you back down to the block and then it's 1 pass away is open, or you drive. And they were I thought Boston did a good job of keeping you driving to the right or to the left, not down the lane, not down the middle, but we're going to force you to the side. And the passes that were wide, that were open, the most open for 3 were 1 pass away from the wing up top. But that's the spot that you usually find Derrick Jones in. That's the spot that you find Green in. That's the spot that you find not your primary shooters. Do you think it's a case that Dallas is going to have to go to more of their shooters? And honestly, they don't have a ton. You're looking at guys like, and they played him last night, but Tim Hardaway, not my favorite player, but he can shoot. Is this a thing where you think that to break this defense, you're going to have to put more shooting on the court?
Yeah, I definitely think it's something they're going to look at, because I didn't think, look, I thought Hardy last night, I mean, he was playing as if he was Kevin Durant. Like he had 8 shots. He had 8 shots in 11 minutes, and all of them were like shots he went and got on his own. I was kind of surprised by that. It's one thing to play with confidence. It's another thing to kind of play, I think, a little bit above your pay grade and what you're trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish offensively. Like some wild drives against that kind of length. Those are bad possessions. I thought Maxi Kleber looked incredibly uncomfortable. I saw somebody in the chat say, "Oh, this is their best lineup," and it had Kleber included. I'm like, what were you watching last night that I didn't watch? He did not look comfortable. His stat line in 19 minutes, he had 1 field goal attempt for 2 points, no rebounds
That's
in
wild.
19 minutes. In 19 minutes, as your power forward or center, whatever spot he's playing at the time, not a single rebound. Are you kidding me? 1 assist, 1 block, 1 turnover, 2 fouls. And there was a play, I don't know if you remember this, in the second half. No, I'm sorry, it was the first half. He caught the ball in transition ahead of the pack. There was like one defender back. He caught the ball. He turned. There was nobody within 25 feet of him.
Yeah.
And he just never even looked at the rim. And was like, couldn't wait to get that ball back to somebody. And I was like, man, he doesn't feel comfortable out here at all. So he's a guy maybe you would think could. And I'm not saying, look, that he can't snap out of that. He's a veteran player. Maybe just he was a little bit, had some jitters. I don't know what it was. Maybe he can snap out of it next game and give them some shooting. Hardaway can give them some shooting. Josh Green, 1 for 4, only had 1 3-point attempt, and he made it. Tim Hardaway took 1 and missed it. Hardy took 3, made 1. Kyrie missed all 5. PJ Washington is a major factor here in regard to this, because his 3-point shooting has been very important for this team. He doesn't hit a single 3 in the game. So across the board, that nobody stepped up and gave them some sort of supplemental offense from somewhere in terms of shooting to take pressure off of Luka. That obviously, that's the top of the list probably for the Mavericks in game 2. Who's going to make some shots for us? Loosen this up against Luka. It's that simple. Nobody did it in game 1.
So we think Luka being more aggressive and realizing, okay, if they're not helping, you got to score, you got to set a tone early. That's part of it. Guys making shots, including maybe putting more shooters on the court, specifically one pass away. And I'm guessing that Dallas will really look at, okay, we're going to attack this way, and this is where the shots are going to be. I think those are some of the things. But what else do you think you're looking for in game 2? It could be from Boston's side, but it also could be from Dallas's side still.
Look, and this is kind of the way that it goes in a game like this to start out a series. You're really focused on Dallas here. Like Boston did a lot of the things that they're really good at. They played to their strengths in this game, and they played at a high level. There's not a ton of adjustments that they're going to have to make based on what they did. The disruption to Dallas that their defense had, the way they operated their offense and took advantage of the switches, the way they shot the ball when they got looks. There's not much there. This is about Dallas. Game 2 is going to be about Dallas. How different do they look? How much more comfortable do some of these role players look? How does Kyrie look at the start of the game? Does he come out really aggressive? Does Luka play more like we're talking about? Like, okay, this is how you want to play me? Watch. I'm going for 40, 45. Nobody can stop me. Here's what it's going to look like. But without doing that at the exclusion of Kyrie Irving, where he goes 8 minutes at the start of the game and doesn't get involved. They need both of those guys to get involved early in the game. We're going to see what role players feel more comfortable. Does Jason Kidd go more to a Hardaway, a veteran player that, at one point was our 3rd leading scorer on the team, and we've forgotten all about him because of the injuries, but he's there. So that's something else they're going to look at. This is all about Dallas, Adam. All of it in game 2. What do they do differently on both ends? Who looks differently individually for them?
The guy that I look different. I mean, look, Kyrie and Luka, Kyrie in particular is going to have to make some shots. But the guy outside of that I think has played the most outside of himself was Derrick Lively. And you mentioned some of the stuff defensively. He picks up 5 fouls in the 3rd quarter alone. But even offensively, defensively, I just think he's going to have to make adjustments. He's a young player. So I think it's harder for him. Like, he's been very successful with that lob and being the pick and roll, setting good screens. Defensively, he's done a good job. He's going to have to. Porzingis is a different challenge. Defensively, as you mentioned, maybe it's not about getting all the way into a space, but being a little bit smarter about how you positionally match up with him. And then offensively, if the lob's not there, you know what is going to be there is the offensive rebound. No question. I actually think, to me, that's the number one place he can make his imprint in game 2 is to go hit the offensive glass. He had 1 in game 1 in 18 minutes. If they're taking away the lob, get ready for offensive rebounds every single time, and just know Luka's taken 12 shots in the 1st quarter of game 2.
Well, yeah, listen, it has to be a factor for them. Tip outs and second chance conversion opportunities. Lively plays 18 minutes and he has 1 field goal attempt. No lobs, no, had 1 offensive rebound. It was not a factor in that way at all. Has to be different, particularly if you are going to extend an extra defender in Luka's direction anytime he comes in the lane, which they did, and Kyrie as well. Then there are lanes to go and sprint in there and position yourself. And part of the problem is, look, Boston will make you pay if you go to the offensive glass with a couple of guys and you don't get it. They play. We talked about Indiana and their pace. Boston plays that way too when they're at their best. That ball gets up the floor quickly. And I thought there were some plays early when this game was getting away from them during that run. I watched it again this morning because I wanted to see the last 6 minutes of the 1st quarter. There were plays where the ball got all the way up the floor behind Dallas's defense, and now they're running, sprinting, retreating, trying to catch up to the ball. And as a result, the secondary offense was there. One was a kick out where it was a straight line drive to the rim because nobody was in position. One was a trail three. One was a drive from the corner where they were so imbalanced defensively that two guys stopped the drive on the baseline, but then Luka didn't drop down and protect the last pass, and Jrue Holiday got an uncontested layup. It was all created by pace up the floor. So there's a risk you run by going if you don't get it. But that's what Lively and Gafford have been doing all year. You go and you sprint back. You have to do both. That's what you're on the floor to do.
Right.
And so you're right. That's another area in which both of those guys can have more of an impact.
That's what I would look for from Lively. It's the biggest thing. And I would just say, hey, there's 7 offensive rebounds to be had in this game. Based on how they're guarding you, there's going to be about 7 offensive rebounds. Luka's going to be shooting a lot. Kyrie's going to be shooting a lot. Just play like Moses Malone down there. Just be ready for the rebound every single time. Is there anything else from this game that you want to talk about, or anything else going into game 2 that's on your mind?
I just think this is now going to come down to very much to an individual challenge for Dallas's best 2 players. That's what this is going to be. You're going to need timely help from guys and they've had it this entire postseason run. Timely shooting out of some of these role players, timely plays around the rim by their bigs. It felt like none of that happened last night. I just think the question is going to be, how confident are they going to be able to maintain, going into game 2 with what just happened to them? Because they were throttled and they had a long time off. It wasn't like a tired team coming in. They just played, on Monday night on a game 7, and they came in, and you would absolutely expect this. This shouldn't have happened with that kind of time off, that kind of time to prepare. To get throttled like that by a team where basically you let them play their best version of themselves for an entire half. That just can't happen. And so I'm just looking at Dallas's reaction to it, and particularly their best 2 players, and how much better are they, and to what extent can they control the game? Because I have a lot of faith in those guys. But what they showed in game 1 does not give you a lot of confidence. So it's up to them now to restore that for everybody that believes in them in the first half of the next game.
The biggest concern for me, like when you get into some of the X's and O's and adjustments, there's enough there for Dallas to say, okay, game 2 will be different. But the biggest concern for me was Boston's discipline on defense, their rotations, everything was just so crisp and so impressive. And when you watch Dallas, it's below that. And that's one of those things that you can improve your focus, you can improve your effort, those things a little bit. But the finals, usually you're within 5 degrees, right, of what you're capable of doing. And Boston is just so clearly at the top floor in that regard. And Dallas, was probably like a 5 or a 6 in that game. But they have a lot of headway to improve.
In that game, you're right, Adam. You're 100% right. But I will say this. I think part of that had to do with how bad that last 6 minutes of the first quarter went.
Yeah.
Because listen, your energy level defensively and your belief is going to be a lot stronger when you're in the game. I mean, if that game is 40-40 with 5 minutes left in the second quarter, I don't know, man. I think the rest of that game becomes like a nail biter. This game got away from them early, and I thought that affected what you're talking about, which is playing with max force. And I don't think Dallas did it. Boston absolutely did. And that's what's going to be really apparent to Dallas when they watch that film.
All right, Emma, we got a couple super chats to get out of here on. What are the people saying? Psycho Blue says, B-Ball Cthulhu thought it was nice to see a team turn the gas back on when the other team called them out for getting bored of the beatdown. Well, there you go. All right. B-Ball Cthulhu, we always have to check in with him, Legs, see what he has to say. Carlos Hernandez says, is a Luka, Kyrie, PJ, Kleba, Lively lineup better for this series? So Luka, Kyrie, PJ, Kleba, Lively. You're shaking your head.
No, I'm not. I don't like that at all. I don't like – if you're going to play Kleba, I almost feel like you're going to play a smaller lineup, play him at the 5, you put him out there for his shooting. If you're going to play him out there with Lively and you're asking Lively to do most of the work against Porzingis, so who's Kleba left to guard in that situation? And he did not look confident offensively at all last night. So he could be an X factor for them. But since he came back from the injury, that's not a large sample size. He has not really come close to looking like the guy that has really helped them since he's been in Dallas, helped them in a big way earlier in the playoffs against the Clippers when he had a big moment with 5 made threes. He didn't look like that guy last night. And if you're going to play him alongside of a big, I just think now you got real issues defensively and how you're going to guard him, even worse than you had last night. You might decide, hey, you know what? We're going to go smaller. Horford's in the game and not Porzingis because that's a lot of length. They go with Horford at the center, and maybe they got a bench guy in or two. Maybe you want to go to a smaller lineup and see what that can do to spread Boston out, and Kleber can hopefully walk into some threes. But I don't like him playing alongside Lively. Look, comes down to this. They're guys that have been playing great for them. Got to play better, flat out.
Yeah.
Kyrie's got to be better. PJ Washington's got to be better. Their centers have to be better across the board. Luka too, but I don't think Luka was as far below his standard as I think you think he was. But I think everybody else, nah, man, flush this. You flush it, but you remember it because you got to do something different next game.
Yeah. Hit that outro music, Emma. I will say I was very impressed with Boston in game one. I just thought that it wasn't like just shot making. I thought everything they did was so impressive. They played smart. They played disciplined. They played connected. And even when that game got to 8 points, as you mentioned, that did get a little tight. Kyrie had a wide open three, could have made it even more interesting. But they bent and didn't break and then immediately punched back. And so I tip my hat to Boston. Very impressive game one. On to game two. Any final thoughts, Legs?
No, man, I was so looking forward to it. It was kind of a letdown whatever. Whoever wins. But I just wanted a close game. Let's hopefully we get one in game two.
There you go. Everybody, thanks so much for hanging out with us all week. We're trying to get to 20,000 subs by the end of this finals. I think we're going to get there. You guys have been helping us out. So hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed, what are you doing? You want to check out the show. We're back next week, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Have a great weekend, everybody. We'll see you.
All silly like the mayor.